Our mission is to build a larger, more vibrant black community in Lexington and to share the history of over 400 years of black residents in our town. So we wanted a place we could say, okay, but who are those people, right? The ones that we should have in the pantheon, the ones we should look up to cover those 400 years. Because otherwise it gets really hard to say what are you doing? And so with that, we looked at who are the Lexington residents, the greater Boston residents, and the folks across Massachusetts that have impacted Lexington and the country as a whole. And we're really lucky here in Lexington that we have folks like the Burdews who were here when it was Cambridge Farms. And so we have their grandson who fought on the Green as one of our banner honorees. And then on the other hand, we have folks like Leona Martin and the 3 banner honorees tonight who are our 20th century residents. And what have they done? So we span that entire expanse of time from colonial Lexington to the present.
It's historically super significant. I've learned a lot through all of these banners, mostly people that I did not know. They're great. It was great to have a family member, my great uncle, Bill Curtis, honored in this round. And in the originals, it was just so much history that I didn't know about. Quack Walker and just an amazing history in Lexington. So, you want to get them right, especially when the family members are alive and they have to go through them. So, there's some pressure there, but, I just try and have fun with it because I love to draw. And so it's not work, even though it takes a lot of work.
So my father loves this town and he is such an extrovert. He's such a community person. He's such a generous, caring person. He loves to engage, and to be honored by this town that he took so much pride in ownership, so much pride in participation and involvement and in community just means the world and really truly just validates his life.
Being a college student and seeing a lot of people, especially my school's the most liberal school in the country right now, I think that seeing this is a great example of kind of a way that we can bring civil rights to the forefront, and just hearing about how they're bringing it into education, they're bringing it into schools, younger generations are learning and hearing about this. I think that it's just a great step in the right direction as to how we can just educate people more and understand where the problems lie in modern day era as well, and kind of bring those to the forefront and keep the history going for the future.
I had the fortunate chance to meet Sherry back when she was a school committee member, and she was such an inspiration that she was the first African American member, and now we have a school committee member that has 3 peoples of color. So we've come a long way, and she's definitely an inspiration for that.
She was the first black woman to be on the Lexington School Committee. I'm the first black man to be on Lexington School Committee. So I definitely look back at her campaign and some of the things she did and the things she said and how well she represented the entire Lexington community. And I tried to implement and take a lot of her guidance and inspiration and incorporate that into all that I do as a school committee member.
The banner project has been really an eye-opener for a lot of people. I was really glad to hear that it's become part of the school curriculum for elementary school aged children to learn about it through the banners. I especially think it's nice that this year's 3 banners are devoted to Lexington's own local residents. Right. All 3 of them.
Wow, what a great turnout. This is beautiful. Glad you could all make it. So, as a historian, I'll start off with several stories and then we'll get to why you're here. ABCL has come a long way in 6 years, and that's why I'm so excited. So it all began in the spring of 2017 in a restaurant. You may remember across the street, there was a Panera Bread. So on April 2nd, 2017, a group of black folks met up in Panera Bread and took over a corner of the store. And we shared stories about our time in Lexington and our amazement that we had never crossed paths. Then some of the elders in our group said, well, you know, back in the 70s, there was this organization called the Concerned Black Citizens of Lexington. They were, what? Who knew? And as we kept talking, we realized, right, like so many stories over the last 400 years of black folks in Lexington, those stories had been forgotten or lost. So that's why one of the primary missions of ABCL is to capture that history and to share that history. Our goal is to serve as a repository of history, and the umbrella of that is the Black History Project of Lexington. And that has three, because why not, right? Three. It has three levels, right? So the first level is the Oral and Visual History Project of Lexingtonians of African descent. Second, that's why you're all here, ABCL's Black History Banners. And third, hopefully rolling out this year, is Lexington's Black Heritage Trail. So we couldn't do this alone. We couldn't do this without the folks here in this room and, of course, the folks on whose shoulders we stand, who we're honoring. So we're pleased to have two of our partners in the room. One of our partners is the Lexington Historical Society. The society serves as archivists for our work collecting oral and visual history. Our other partners are Lexington Public Schools. They have really, really embraced our work. The Performing Arts program has incorporated the music of one of our banner honorees, Florence Price, in their curriculum. And then these banners have been added to the third grade curriculum. I'll read to you what Alex Kischel described. She is the K through 5 Social Studies Coordinator for LPS. Students in the third grade learn about the history of Massachusetts. During Black History Month, students are exposed to a variety of Black heroes and activists connected to the Lexington, Boston, and/or Massachusetts through the Banner Project. After introducing the project and mission of ABCL, teachers choose one person each day to read aloud to students. Also, there are additional kid design resources provided for many of the profiles if the class would like to learn more. Afterward, students generate questions they would like to ask the person if they could. These questions can also be used to drive further research. This skill aligns with a key social studies practice from the Massachusetts framework. We are deliberately including the varieties of stories represented by the Banner Project before learning about various states of freedom that existed in colonial Massachusetts, including enslavement. While this goes beyond the scope of the Massachusetts framework, we feel it is critical for students to first explore stories of accomplishment, success, and resistance in order to have a richer, more complex understanding of Black lives in this history. So let's get to those three new Banner honorees who will be enriching Lexington's third grade curriculum. Our first Banner honoree is Dr. William Childs Curtis. Dr. Curtis moved to Lexington in 1962 to become the manager of radar systems and radar engineering for the Aerospace Division of RCA in Burlington, Mass. He lived and worshiped in Lexington until his death in 1976. An avid golfer, they bought a house on Fremont Street that abuts the golf course. Coincidentally, Dr. Curtis is related to our banner artist, Kamali Thornell. and the entire third row on this side. So now we'll invite Jason Camardi up here to tell you more about the trailblazing life of Dr. Curtis, and then he'll be followed by Ruth Curtis, his eldest daughter. Jason?
Thanks, Sean. Evening. So many of us know the story of the Hidden Figures, the biography turned film which recounts the story of African-American mathematicians who helped launch the first Americans into space. I have the honor this evening of giving you a very brief overview of yet another hidden figure who helped make it possible to land on the moon. The man who helped make the celebrated giant leap for mankind was Dr. William Childs Curtis. On July 20th, 1969, the first human being stepped foot on the moon. Precisely 6 years previously, that same month to that historic achievement, RCA, the Radio Corporation of America, was publicly announced as having won the contract as a subcontractor to Grumman Aircraft Engineering. The work was conducted at its Aerospace Communication and Controls Division in Burlington, Massachusetts, nearby. Dr. Curtis came from an educated and distinguished family. His ancestors and relatives included literate slaves who purchased their freedom. They were also part of the Marion Nine group that led the foundation of the Lincoln Normal School, a school for African Americans previously denied the right to an education. This school would later become Alabama State University, a well-established HBCU, historically black college and university. Curtis's family were also comprised of educators, dentists, and doctors. Born in St. Louis, Missouri, Curtis suffered under the segregation laws which would not allow him to attend a university engineering program there. But he secured funding to attend what was now known as the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. There, Dr. Curtis earned a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering in 1934 and a Master's of Science in Electrical Engineering in 1935. He joined the Industrial Education Department at the Tuskegee Institute in 1935 as an instructor, and he later rose to become the director of the School of Mechanical Industries in 1940. A meteoric rise, so to speak, in such a short time. But he did not stop there. In 1945, Dr. Curtis left to attend Harvard University, where he earned another Master's of Science, this time in Communications Engineering. He then earned a PhD in Engineering Science and Applied Physics in 1949 and worked for a time at the Raytheon Company. That same year, Dr. Curtis then returned to the Tuskegee Institute, where he served as the Dean of the School of Engineering. Then, in 1954, Dr. Curtis joined RCA and became the manager for radar systems analysis and the radar engineering under the Aerospace Systems Division. So most of us know the story of the Apollo Command and Service Module, the CSM, that bell-shaped vessel which ferried astronauts from the Earth to lunar orbit. However, a separate vessel, the Lunar Excursion Module, or the LEM, was actually what transported astronauts to the lunar and moon's surface. While at RCA and under Dr. Curtis's leadership, RCA's team created a rendezvous radar for a tracking transponder, which served as a homing device for the command module to determine the lunar module's location. In tandem with this, they would guide the lunar module to and from the command module up around the moon and be able to safely go down to the moon's surface. Separately, the radar could also make range and Doppler measurements, and so in tandem, this technology made it possible to achieve a precise and safe lunar landing. This technology functioned under the strain of space travel, which included the vibration of rocket thrust, extreme colds of space at minus 300 degrees Fahrenheit, and the hot gases expelled by control jets at more than 250 degrees Fahrenheit. Dr. Curtis was a holder of patents for integrated circuits, which had the practical applications for radar and for communication systems. And he also had patents for film recording techniques related to radar. Dr. Curtis was married to Ruth Augusta Perry Curtis. She was an active member in the Episcopal Church, and she died in July of 2000. She's buried in Massachusetts. They had 3 children, Ruth Constance Curtis, Susan Julia Curtis, and William Bill Curtis. Bill was a graduate from the Lexington High School in 1965. With that, I turn it over to my counterpart, and I will say thank you for your time and attention. And I also like to thank Sean Osborne and Gary Franklin, a family member whose significant contributions made this presentation possible. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming out. It's a pleasure to speak with you about my father. Just bear with me. I didn't know. Okay, here we go. I didn't realize that all of that would be covered in the previous speech. So I'll try to throw some personal elements into it. My father grew up in the African-American, my name is Ruth Curtis, by the way. My father grew up in the African-American section of St. Louis, Missouri, which was known as the Ville, where his father, as said, was an MD and community leader. And around 1929, when Daddy was ready to apply to colleges, he wanted to study electrical engineering, and as was said, Missouri didn't allow that for black students, so they sent him across the Mississippi to Illinois, but that program happens to be one of the best, and was even then one of the best in the country. So he lucked out. Even though he couldn't live on campus, he had to live in the black community in a boarding house, and he couldn't sit amongst the rest of the students. He had to sit off to the side. But the thing was, he had been inspired by his professors at Dunbar High School, which was the black high school, segregated high school, and he said that he was taught by science and math by PhDs because they couldn't find work anywhere else. So he had excellent teachers. And he also he was inspired by the Wright brothers and also by the Spirit of St. Louis flight. And he used to get on the on the streetcar and go out to the airport and watch the planes take off and land. So his interest started early. And so when he did get finished with his master's, and he started interviewing for jobs, when they saw his complexion, when he came in for interviews, we don't hire colored people, and so he was fortunate to get a job at Tuskegee as was described. And during World War II, his specialty was radar. And so he taught radar to the Tuskegee Airmen. He was not in the military, but he taught radar to the Tuskegee Airmen at the Tuskegee Army Air Base, which was right near Tuskegee. And so during his time at Harvard, my sister and I were born at Tuskegee. My brother was born in Boston while Dad was at Harvard. And he actually when he came back, he founded the School of Engineering once he had, because he had his PhD and became dean of the school. And in the mid-50s, when he was hired by RCA, we all moved north and to Bucks County, PA. And Daddy's job was in Camden, New Jersey at that time for RCA. And during that time, my sister Susan and I finished high school and went on to college. Incidentally, she went to Radcliffe and I went to Wellesley. So while we were in college, Daddy was given the new RCA assignment, which was located in Burlington, Massachusetts. And that is when they moved to Lexington, nearby, and bought the house at 72 Fremont Street. And I remember my brother loved to ride his bicycle over to Hanscom Field, because he had the flying bug too, and he eventually got his his amateur flyer's license. And my dad, as mentioned, loved to play golf, and he was happy to go over to the Lexington golf course. My mother came from a long line of Episcopalians, including priests, and became active in the Episcopal Church of Our Redeemer, and incidentally was one of the early members of the group that was mentioned, the predecessor of this group, the Concerned Black Citizens of Lexington, because she was a real community activist. And so we knew nothing about what Daddy was doing because it was top secret at the Burlington RCA location. We just knew he was an engineer in Burlington. But on the day of the first moon landing, July 20th, 1969, I was living in Cambridge and working in Cambridge by then, and I got in my little blue Volkswagen and drove out to Lexington, where I wanted to go sailing with my dad and mom, because once we got out of college, Dad said he's going to buy a sailboat, which he did, and he kept it in Marblehead. And so every now and then I went sailing with them. But on this particular day, Daddy said, I'd like to watch the moon landing. Let's come home a little early. So when we got back to Lexington, we all watched the moon landing. And when the lunar excursion module got to the moon and the astronaut said the Eagle has landed, Daddy said, well, we made it. And we just thought, as an engineer, he was interested. Because it was top secret, so we didn't know. And we only found out much later about the details after my dad died. He died suddenly at the age of 62, really surprised us. But after that, his fellow engineers came to the house and brought this notebook full of information, because by then it wasn't top secret anymore, outlining his involvement with the moon landing. So anyway, my father was one of the many pioneers. My mother talked about pioneers all the time, and with her southern accent it came out pioneers, from the Black community, whose accomplishments are getting wider recognition now, and I'm happy to know that. I'm sure we all are. And thanks to this organization for its role in this. We thank you for your work giving recognition for people like my dad. Thank you. This is truly an honor. Thank you. I will share it with my sister, Susan.
Thank you, Ruth, and thank you, Jason. So our next banner honoree is Sherry Gordon Towns. She was the first Black school committee member in Lexington. She was also the second Black Lexingtonian elected town official. I heard about Sherry Gordon Towns because I sent out a trivia note on Twitter a couple years ago saying, who was the first? And someone said, Sherry Gordon. I said, no, it was Leona. She goes, no, that is impossible. It all depends on when you come into town. So when Leona was already elected, it wasn't a new campaign when he moved into town, so he'd know about her. But that was the impact that Sherry had on the community, that someone 20 years later, still remembered her campaign from 2001. So the Towns family moved to Lexington in 1987. They lived at the Franklin School Apartments behind Clark Middle School from 1987 to 2008. In addition to being elected to the school committee in 2001, she served as Bridge School PTA president, PTA Council co-vice president, director of the Youth Explorations in Science, and as a town meeting member. Some of you may remember her as well from the Lexington 2020 Vision Committee. And in addition to her local work, Sherry was the director of the accounting office for the governor of Massachusetts and the fiscal officer for a state agency. Some of you know the family well, and so you know that she was very proud of her children and worked to ensure that each of them had a strong academic experience, and that's part of what drove her to run for the school committee. I now invite her son, Rashid Towns, to come forward and share a more intimate information about his mother, Sherry Gordon Towns. Rashid is from the Lexington class of 1998 and Harvard class of 2002. Rashid.
Thank you. I love how a Princeton man says Harvard. It's just so nice. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, ABCDL. Good evening, Miss Martin. It's wonderful seeing you again. Miss Kerr, wonderful seeing you again, too. Mr. Fresnel, thank you very much. Wonderful for your work as well. Past and current banner honorees and other distinguished guests, welcome and thank you for being here tonight. It has been an honor to live here and serve this great community. It is an honor to have a banner lifted that will mark my family's history in this amazing community. Now, that last sentence is something how my mother would have opened her speech if she was here tonight. And I'm getting a little emotional because it's bittersweet to be here today. I think this is actually my first speech in this town, really of any kind, since my mom's passing, so forgive me if it's a little bit rusty. And geez, it's really daunting. The first speech that I gave, actually, for this town was at Care Memorial Hall, and I remember that opening line of, "Thank you, distinguished guest," my mom and I drilled over and over again. See, I was really nervous about that Martin Luther King Day speech, but I was able to have this great rock to sort of help guide me through. And from that day forward, I mean, from many days, but that really helped me get over my initial shyness of speaking in public, and something that I've not done today. I want to actually just pause for a brief moment. It is fantastic that this organization is here, and I was talking to my good friend Steve. We kind of what would our lives had been if this was here when we were growing up. Particularly Steve. Steve's a guy who I've always kind of looked up to, even though we've been in the same grade. And it's fantastic just to have a place like this. I think when I see so many other young black and brown and tan faces, and so I'm so glad you guys are here tonight. I'm sorry, I know I got time. So my mom served in many capacities, both official and also unofficial here in Lexington, and thankfully she had many opportunities like this to talk to people. I think some of the same people in this very room. She loved it. I think as many as you can attest to community organizing, whether it was in the PTA or Youth Exploration of Science or the school committee, even if it was like, the baseball or basketball, all those little things really energized her. It really energized her to get people involved, and it was something that she tried to impart onto us, her children, and also to her grandchildren. She worked really hard to make this place, her family and really the community, a better place to live. And she even when she was struck with illness that made it difficult for her to get around. And really up to her final years, she just really couldn't do it anymore. She still had that fire to make places better. My mom was a fierce advocate for your place in this community, not just our place, not just my place as a family, not just our place as an African-American family, but your place in the community. She really encouraged me and my sisters to have a diverse set of friends who look differently than us, love differently than us, believe differently than us. And look, it was definitely hard sometimes not being affluent in a very affluent community. At times it was really tough being black and being a person of color in a town that was supposedly very liberal, but sometimes we didn't live up to that promise. It was tough when people refused to deal with us because they didn't know we belonged in this town. It was tough being told where I came from, and I was like, Waltham Street? Allen Road? I don't know. Stedman Road? I don't know. Where do you think I come from? If you can believe it, my mom wasn't even allowed to vote one time during her own election. Now, this is despite having her name outside, and it was on the ballot and on her license, but just the person didn't believe that we didn't belong in town, even though we had lived in town way longer than they had. So it was also tough, and Steve and I just talked about this a few minutes ago. It was tough wondering if I was black enough, you know. And so she would sort of hold my hand and sing this old song from the 70s, Am I Black Enough for You? I'm not going to bother you with my poor rendition of it, but her goal was to make everything, even just little old me in that one few moments, just realize I belong, and my way of being whoever I was, whoever I am, fit into it. Funny enough, there's another Lexingtonian, Professor Henry Louis Gates. I went to his office hours one time and had a similar complaint about this, and he said, hey, you know, there's like 40 million black people, so there's 40 million different ways to be black, and I told my mom that. She's like, that's what I've been telling you for years. So unfortunately, I should have known I did not need a professor to tell me, and PBS star, to tell me what my mom would tell me all this time, but so yeah, look, there were low points, and I'm not here to sell a score or make new points or whatever. I'm just mentioning them because I want to make a point that through it all, my mom still fought for everyone's place in this town, and through that love of our friends and neighbors, we made a place, and I see many of them here. And again, thank you for coming. So really, despite all I said before, I mean, there were many, many, many highs. Thank you for waving, my daughter. I see you. You can sit down, please. Thank you. They take after me. So there were baseball and basketball games. There were basketball team dinners. There were birthday parties, swimming lessons at the pool, skating lessons at Hayden, piano lessons at the old Yamaha School of Music. There were times where once I needed to lose some weight, and I was feeling kind of silly about it, so my mom actually joined the aerobics class with me, so I wouldn't feel more silly. I felt more silly having my mom there, but at least I wasn't the only one. There was one time where I told my mom I wasn't sure if I wanted to go to LHS or maybe Minuteman Tech, so she actually enrolled me. I don't know if they still do this, but they used to do a Minuteman Tech program for kids to see if you wanted to do vocational school. I'm like, great, I love cars, this is gonna be fantastic. And then I found out quickly I did not like cars enough to change oil the whole time. But it was through my mom's encouragement to find that path, to really push ourselves, to find where we were and where we are in this world. And I was able to do that. My parents did not want us to start hating this town or the people in it just because of the way we were treated sometimes. And they did want us to live here for the wide amount of experiences and resources that this community had to offer. So yeah, she encouraged us and others to make use of them all. We all had a place in our community. It was our community, and we were supposed to take and give as much as we can. And she reminded us of that to our past. Now, I don't remember how often my parents might have said those things publicly. See, my parents both come from big families. I think I have 22 uncles and aunts between the two of them. So I believe that's kind of why they both, my father is a firefighter and also equally, as much as my mom was a civil rights worker, my dad helped desegregate the Boston Fire Department. And they both believe fervently in public service, but they also did like to sort of have private moments, private thoughts to themselves. And so they kind of taught us how to sort of live and coexist in big groups, but also kind of have your own piece for yourself. And so they didn't really always talk about the good and the bad things. So some of these things I kind of had to infer or sort of learn through my own or by asking Professor Gates for them. So when Sean asked me to mention how it was growing up in Lexington, not just give my mom's biography, but actually how she really influenced us and those around her, it struggled a little bit because I expect what everyone would want to hear would be like, about racism or how we got into college or whatever, but I think the things that I think the most about, the things that mean the most to me, are some things that would only have happened we lived in Lexington. So I want to share with you something that I've only shared with my mom. I haven't even shared with my kids or my rest of my family, my sisters or whatever. So like as we said before, we lived in the Franklin School apartments, and then for those of you who are aware, that's right behind Clark, and there is a baseball field, and there's woods there. Now there's roughly 3 main paths in the woods. One path will take you to Clark Middle School. Another path, if you take it far enough, will actually take you to Bowman Elementary School, which is my elementary school. But there's another sort of third path, a smaller path that led to like a community garden. And there was a time when we had a small plot there. Again, I'm not sure if it was ours or if we were helping a friend or a neighbor who had it. But I remember my mom showing it to me and showing some, I think she was trying to plant some okra. And then we went from there to where we had this little plot behind our townhouse, trying to grow some vegetables there. And let's see for a second. It was just me and her, my mom, myself, the wind and the sunshine. And it's just that kind of moment that I think you cherish as a kid, where you sort of see, your time doesn't stop for you, but it stops for your parents. And it's an interesting moment to see sort of time stop for her, for the smile on her face as she's gardening. And then that sort of hit me as I was thinking about it. I think that's what she was trying to do here. She was a gardener in a sense. She was trying to, even if somebody else's garden, she's sort of trying to tend to it, help something grow. And that's really kind of how she approached the different organizations she was a part of. It's really helping something grow and helping giving the soil. I'm mixing this metaphor too, I'm stretching too much. Giving something that people can actually kind of grow from. So, and I think we and my family, and I hope you guys all can appreciate some of that gardens that she tried to create. So let's join in with this. When my mother passed, someone said to me, may her memory be a blessing. And it's something that I use now whenever someone's parent passes, because I think it's a beautiful phrase. So let me say it now to you and to other families who are honored today and in the past with these banners. I hope that their memory of these banner honorees can be a blessing to all of you. And I hope for my mom that what she could stand for is that, faults and all, this is your community, and this is our community. And I hope my mom's banner can help us remind us of that fact. So I want to thank you, Sean, for having us here today. Thank you, ABDCL, for all of what you've done for us, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
So our third banner honoree, wow, that was great, is Dr. Martin Luther Kilson. Dr. Kilson was an American political scientist and the first Black academic to be appointed a full professor again at? There you go. Dr. Kilson and his family lived on Elliott Road from 1970 to 2017. And some of you may have heard some of his story during the book talk, but this is another good time to learn more. So I'll invite Mark St. Louis to tell you more about Dr. Kilson and his trailblazing life.
Hi, everyone. Great turnout tonight. Great to see so many people here. My name is Mark St. Louis. Thank you to the Lexington Historical Society for hosting us tonight. It is my honor as a member of ABCL to introduce Martin Kilson for the unveiling of his portrait. I want to acknowledge Martin's family, including his wife of 60 years, Marion Kilson, who's here with us tonight. As well as his three children, Jennifer, Hannah, and Peter. Yep. Also want to welcome his friends and peers joining us who knew Martin, followed his life's work, and were witness to his strong intellect, moral compass, quote, helping hand ethos, unquote, and unrelenting efforts challenging societal orthodoxies and hierarchies and the status quo. Born Martin Luther Kilson Jr. in East Rutherford, New Jersey on Valentine's Day, 1931, Martin was raised by his father, who was a Methodist preacher, and his mother, a homemaker, in the small factory town of Amber, Pennsylvania, just north of Philadelphia. That upbringing in the multi-ethnic, working-class company town with a small yet strong black community buttressed by the church and integrated schools helped shape Martin's life, both academically and socially, and would provide the foundation for Dr. Kilson to reach the highest levels of academia. Martin graduated at the top of his class from Lincoln University, a historically black university in Oxford, Pennsylvania, with a degree in political science in 1953, and went on to earn a master's and PhD from Harvard's Graduate School in 1958 and 1959, respectively. After finishing his doctorate at Harvard, Dr. Kilson was awarded a Ford Foundation Fellowship, which allowed him, accompanied by Marion, to undertake research at Oxford University in the United Kingdom, followed by a period in Africa at the University of Sierra Leone during Sierra Leone's independence from England. This work abroad helped shape his early academic work in African studies. After returning to the U.S. in 1961, Martin was hired as a research associate at the Harvard Center for International Affairs and became a lecturer the following year. In 1964, he became an assistant professor in the Department of Government. And in 1969, Martin became Harvard College's first fully tenured black professor and remained there for over 30 years. He was appointed the Frank G. Thompson Professor of Government in 1988, which he held until his retirement from teaching in 1999, and was appointed Professor Emeritus until his retirement in 2003. Throughout his career, Martin authored numerous books and dozens of academic articles. A Lexington resident for some 47 years, Martin passed away on April 24, 2019, at the age of 88, and is buried at Westview Cemetery. He was survived by his 3 children and 6 grandchildren. It's an honor to be able to introduce Dr. Kilson and unveil his portrait, and thank you for allowing me to do so. Thanks. So I'm going to invite his wife, Marion Kilson, to come up and say a few words.
Thank you very much, Mark. I think you've said it all. But I think Martin Kilson would be surprised and pleased by having the Association of Black Citizens of Lexington mount a 2023 banner in his honor. As Mark told you, Martin Kilson lived in Lexington for 47 years, and our 3 children attended Lexington Public Schools, and they are here today, and some of my grandchildren are here as well. And I think Mark has covered a lot of what I was going to say about highlights in Martin's life story. But born in 1931, Martin grew up in a small African-American community in the company mill town of Ambler, outside of Philadelphia. And after completing high school and spending a year as a chef's assistant, he enrolled at Lincoln University, graduating as the valedictorian of his class in 1953. That fall, he entered graduate school in Harvard's government department, receiving his PhD in 1959. And after returning from research in West Africa, he began teaching at Harvard in 1961 and became, as Mark has said, the first African-American tenured professor in Harvard College in 1969. He taught courses on African and African-American topics, and in his final decade of teaching, he also taught a course on the political cultures of white ethnic groups at the request of his department chair. He retired as the Frank G. Thompson Professor of Government in 2003. I want to conclude by reading one of his former students' assessment of Martin's impact on him. In his foreword to Martin's memoir, Cornel West wrote, "Kilson's integrity and tenacity in the life of the mind are what struck me most deeply when I met him my freshman year at Harvard in the fall of 1970. I enrolled in his legendary Sox High 13 course on Black politics, spent countless hours in his office, reveled with his family in Lexington and Dublin, New Hampshire. Kilson taught me by example for nearly 50 years what it is to be a serious intellectual with one's own voice, style, and temperament. My own odyssey is unimaginable without his odyssey, just as we both are flawed yet fighting figures who find joy in our commitment to Black honor and American democracy." My thanks to Sean and Mark and the other members of the Black Citizens of Lexington community for honoring Martin Kilson this evening. Thank you very much.
So thank you all for coming. This was and continues to be a really, really wonderful event. We are just slightly shy of 100 people. which is twice what I planned for, so thank you all for coming. This is one of several events for the Black History Project of Lexington for 2023. So this was our kickoff. The banners will be hung in the, displayed in the library starting next week. They are typically displayed in downtown Lexington, but with the Streetscape project, the brackets aren't in place yet, so they'll have to wait till next year. But on Sunday, 15 January, ABCL is hosting a Martin Luther King Jr. concert at Fallen Community Church. On Saturday, 2 April, we are celebrating Jazz History Month and another banner honoree at Cary Hall. And on Sunday, the 4th of June, here in the Green, another concert because there's so many ways to think about and celebrate Black excellence and history here in Lexington. So what I'd like to leave you with is this thought. If you have stories to share, and I saw a lot of nods here from people, so if you have stories to share about your lives here in Lexington as Black residents, past and present, your experiences with these banner honorees or other future to-be banner honorees, we welcome those stories. As you heard, there are so many facets, right? There's so many ways that you can look at people and you don't know that they touched somebody else that you knew, right? And that's part of the human condition. That's part of what builds a society, is seeing those connections. And that's part of our mission as ABCL, is to show those connections to ourselves within our membership and with the greater Lexington community. So if you have stories to share, go to www.abclex.org or email me at historian@abclex.org. And in addition to finishing off the lovely food that we had at the beginning, we also have a cake with the pictures of the banners on them, so those will look good for a few minutes, so make sure you get your picture now with that, and then cut into it, enjoy the cake from our local caterer, and if you have stories to tell tonight, LexMedia would love to take just a few minutes of your time to capture your stories. But again, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Have a good night.